Hi everyone, this is Sharon. For this month's design team project for Raindrop Lila, I thought I would have a craft with me session, and we will be making some Victorian style calling cards along with some maybe advertising pieces. And I also want to make this really fun gusseted pouch to hold our pieces. This pouch is made from one sheet of paper. It comes together really easy, as do all the ephemera pieces. So I hope you will join me today and do some crafting with me. Whenever I make these kinds of pieces, I like to pull out my originals to get some inspiration. So if we look at some of these cards a little bit closer, here's one that's very simple in form, just a rectangular piece of cardboard, but it's got a nice beautiful picture on the front. And then there's this one that's kind of an unusual shape, and it's got this beautiful punched edge. And then there's this piece on top with the graphic, but it reveals the person's signature underneath, and I really like those. This one I use as inspiration quite often. It's actually adhered to a piece of ribbon. This one is kind of like almost feels like a taffeta ribbon. I've seen them with some like satin ribbons. So I make these every once in a while and use this as inspiration. Here's one with another beautiful decorative edge to it, and we'll do one like that. And then it's got this piece attached as a separate layer, but it doesn't pull up to reveal a signature or anything. This one I pulled out, it's a simple name on there, but they were quite often used to write messages if the person wasn't available. So I thought it would be fun, you know, as a kind of inspiration piece to show that putting a piece of script or book page on the back would kind of do a nice job of duplicating one of the antique ones. And then I love this one. It's got this piece of really frayed kind of satin ribbon around the edge of it, and that's sandwiched in between this front piece and this back piece. So we will make some kind of similar, but put our own twist on them. The two main kits I'm using for my project today is this one, Vintage Collage. It's one that Lila came out with recently, and she's got it in the standard, both standard and tall format. And then I'm also using this Agnes kit, which I absolutely love. These vintage wallpapers have such really pretty colors and patterns. I want to talk about my process just a little bit to kind of give you an idea of how I usually work with digitals. So these two pages are pages that I created in Word. And I work in Word quite a bit when I'm using digitals. I just find it easy. It gives me a lot of flexibility in cropping and resizing images. So for example, for these, I just took pieces of those collage sheets of Lydia's from her collage kit and took the ones I wanted, cropped them, and placed them on a sheet of paper so I could get quite a few on here. I'll just give you an example of what her page, one of her pages looks like. So here's the collage sheet. And on this one, I decided, well, I'd like to work with this image and this image. So I just pulled those two out by cropping the sheet and then resizing to what I wanted. So you can see those on this piece of paper. Now, when I'm working in Word, there is an advanced setting in there where you can keep a high quality format on your images. And I always make sure it's set to high quality so I get the best outcome. Sometimes also in Word, I know my printer prints quite dark, so it allows me to lighten them up just a little bit so they're not so dark when I print them out. This, for me, works best because it allows me to save paper, ink. I don't have a lot of leftover scraps from projects for the pieces that I didn't use. I just find it works best for me. So you can see that I've pulled quite a few images to work with in this project. So my next step will be to cut each of these images out. So for this first card, I have my front cut out, and then for the back, I thought I would use this pretty envelope image that also came from one of the collage sheets. And then I've already got my cardboard or cardstock piece cut. And I should mention The inspiration for this whole project came from a pile of offcuts of cardstock that I had left over from a project. And that usually is what gets me going on making these small cards because they're really convenient and easy to make with all the little offcuts. So the way I made this was to take a die cut set that I have, and I used one of these in here, and I just put that through my die cut machine, and this is what you get. So you get a nice pretty edge on there. And so all I'm going to do for this is glue my two pieces on there, and then I'm done. Like I mentioned, these projects are very simple, and on each one I've just added maybe one little extra element to elevate it to the next level, make it something that's pretty to look at and interesting, but really simple to make. So I'm just taking my glue stick and I'm going to glue this, kind of centering it on that pattern. And we'll turn that over and glue the back side. I'm going to glue off the camera so I don't have glue on my work surface. Okay, and then center that on there. And we've got our first card completed, just like that. I made a prototype similar to this one. I did for each of the ones that I'm going to make, so you can kind of see ahead of time what I'm making. So I used this envelope image for my back on this one. I didn't feel like I wanted to do the extra lacy edge on this. It just didn't seem to lend itself to this image. So what I did to add some extra interest was put a vintage stamp on the back. So that's our first one. Our second card is going to be this one that has a ribbon running through it. So this is my prototype. I had this for my front, and I sandwiched a piece of ribbon in between the front and the back. The back, I used one of the papers from the Agnes kit. I just think that makes a pretty card that you can tuck in a pocket or something. So there's a little bit more work involved with this one. I've just got a piece of cardstock that I will cut down to match the size of my image. And then this is what I printed for the back. So I printed a number of these backs, scaled them down to the size I needed, and then just cut each one out loosely. So I'll do more of a precise cut on these when I get to that part. So my first step will be to run a bead of glue across the back side of this image. And that's where I'm going to glue down my piece of satin ribbon that I took out for this one. So I'm just going to put some glue across the center. Then I'm going to position my ribbon on my work surface. I think that works best. And then just take my glued back and place it down where I like it. I'll just press that down a little bit. And then next I am going to, because this is kind of lumpy and bumpy here, I'm going to put my glue on the cardstock piece and then adhere this down to the cardstock. So I'm going to glue this again off to the side with glue stick just so I don't make a mess on my work surface. Okay, I've got that covered with a layer of glue. This is bigger than what I need, so I'm just going to cut it down after I've got these layered together. And the tricky part is, which I really hadn't thought about until now, is I need to cut this because I don't want the glue on my ribbon. So I'm going to cut this before I actually lay this whole thing down. Hopefully I get it close enough. I think on my prototype, I must have cut them to size first. Okay, I think that will work. The top and bottom I can always fix later. Okay, now I just need to trim the top side of this. And then this side is off a little bit. I'm going to ink it so it kind of blends in a little better. Maybe cut this down a little bit. I have to say it would work better to maybe trace around it, get it sized first. It's a little trickier with these ribbon ones. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. So we've got our layers together. I am going to just do a little bit of inking on these edges where maybe they aren't exactly the same size. Just to kind of camouflage that a little bit. Okay, so next we have our back piece. Now I'm going to have to cut this before I glue it together, so I'm just going to take a pencil and mark it. Actually, yeah, I think that's good. I'm going to cut it. No, I'm going to take it to my paper trimmer and cut it so that it's pretty exact because I want to make sure that it lines up well with that. Okay, I've got my piece cut. I'm just going to line it up and make sure that it looks pretty good as far as the size goes. So I'm going to glue the back of this. Okay, line that up. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then I'm just going to ink my edges like I did on the other one. Just again to kind of blend some of that in. Okay, and that is the back side of our card, and this is the front. So we've got our ribbon ones completed. Next up is our signature cards. Okay, the next card we're going to make is the type with the flap that has the signature underneath to kind of replicate the old antique calling cards. And for this one, I stitched the flap on just to give it a little more security because this will be flapping up and down. And then I added the decorative paper on the back. And I just backed this top sheet here with some old book page so that when that's pulled up, you don't see just the plain white paper. So I will set that one aside. And the one that we're going to make, I'm using this as my front, and this is the backing for this piece, my cardstock, and then I've got the back. And I've got a stamp for my signature. What I used for these is this set. Maybe I should get the packaging. This set by Sam Poole, and it's got some signatures in there, so I just pulled a couple of those out. So again, very simple. I'm going to start out by backing this piece with my book page, so I'm going to put my glue on this piece. Okay, so I've got glue on the back of this, and I'm just going to set it down on the book page. Just kind of lining it up to this edge. And then I will cut that out. Okay, so I've got this covered on the back side. And then the piece of cardstock I have is a little large yet, so I'm going to cut that down. And for these, I made the backing just a little bit bigger than the top flap so you could kind of see what's underneath and lift that up more easily. So I'm just going to kind of position this on here. Oh, I better use my cutter. I'm not going to cut that straight. So I'm just going to mark it here about how wide I want it. And then once I have that cut, I think I'm going to just follow this curve around the top side. Okay, so I think I've got that cut where I want it. Now before I do anything else, I'm going to put my signature under there. So I'm just going to take this acrylic block and add my signature on there. I'm going to use a dark brown ink. This is ground espresso. ink that up good because I think this one is drying out. And I'm going to want that right around there. So now we've got Elsa Gretton on there. And I think what I'm going to do is just stitch this down like I did the other one. I'm going to stitch here, and then when I'm done stitching on it, I'm going to come back and cut that top curve. Okay, I've stitched my piece around the curve on the top. You can probably see it from the back better. This will be covered up because I'm going to put a piece of paper over that. So now I'm just going to take my scissors and kind of curve this. Around the top. I like the way that looks. Okay, so now we are going to cover our back. I picked this pretty wallpaper image for the back side, so I think I will cut that closer to the pattern edge. Okay, I'm going to put my glue with my glue stick on the back of this cardstock, and then just put it down on here and then cut the whole thing out. Okay, I've got this back covered with glue. Here's my pattern paper. I'm just going to set this down on here. Okay, and now we can cut our back paper out around the frame. Okay, so we've got this piece all put together. We've got our top flap, our signature underneath, pretty floral paper on the back side. I think I just want to snip these bottom corners a little bit and then just ink around the edges a bit to give it a little bit more of a worn look. And on the back as well. Okay, that one's finished. We will move on to our last and final card. This last card, again, is super simple. We have a front focal point. We have a little laundry label for embellishment. And then for these, I thought I would just add some antique ledger paper to the back. I had a piece floating around on my desktop, so I thought I might as well use it up. So for the one that we're going to make, I've got my front piece, I've got my laundry label, I've got an offcut of that ledger sheet and my cardstock. So I thought what I'd do with this image, first I was going to cut it out around the frame, but I think I'm just going to leave a little bit of this collaging from her sheet in the background as kind of a frame. So I'm just going to cut around the white piece off of there and keep that little frame on there. So I'm just going to glue it as is, and then we'll cut around once we have it glued to our cardstock. So I'm going to add some glue with glue stick to the back. Okay, I'm just going to cut the white frame off around the outside. Okay, and now we've got this piece of ledger, so I'm just going to glue the back side of this cardstock and stick it down on there. Okay, I've got my back glued, and I'm just going to position it in this upper left corner, and then I just have two sides I need to cut off. There, I love these old Victorian pictures she's got in these kits. All right, so that's our back. We've got our ledger paper on there. I'm going to just, again, snip my corners on this one so they aren't so peaked and new looking. And then we'll ink it up a little bit. And our last step for this one is to add our laundry label. Because this is cloth, I'm going to use some art glitter glue for this step. Just dab a little bit on the back side. And I think we'll add that right up in this corner. I like to kind of leave them hang off the main image just a little bit, so everything isn't quite so square and lined up. And that is our last card. Lastly, I thought we could make a gusseted pouch to put all of our little ephemera pieces in. A couple of months ago, I came across a video by Patricia of Le Café Craft, and I love the way she says it in her French accent. But she was playing in the background while I was crafting, and whenever I see something I like that I don't want to forget, I grab a piece of scrap paper and start folding so I don't forget what it was. And she had a little tutorial on making these gusseted pouches, and I thought they were the greatest thing. You make them from one sheet of paper, and there's just one little dab of glue you need to put in it. It's kind of an origami type thing, and it was really simple and quick. So I made my little prototype really quick while she was on screen and set that aside. So that's what we're going to make today. Now, this was made from a 5-inch piece of paper, and I realized, you know, this makes a pretty small pouch. I realized I needed something probably twice as large for mine. So I decided I would work with a 10-inch square. Now, I wanted to use Lydia's papers for mine, but I can't get a 10 by 10 inch square on an 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper. So there are several options that you can use for a larger size envelope. I will show you, this is the one we're going to be making with these 2 sheets of paper, but I thought I always save these. I have wall calendars in my craft room, and I always save my favorite sheets from those to make envelopes because they're 12 by 12 and they make a nice large size envelope. So this would work. You could cut this down to 10 by 10 or even leave it 12 by 12 if you want a larger size envelope. Any type of like 12 by 12 scrapbooking paper would work. I've got large sheets of wrapping paper, Florentine paper, anything like that you could use for a larger scale. So anyway, I decided I was going to figure out how to make one with her digitals. So what I decided to do was to print a front and back on 2 sheets of paper. So this will be the outside of my envelope. This antique envelope image from one of her green kits will be my inside. And what I decided to do was just to cut around them. I made them 10 this way because I wanted a 10-inch square. And then this way didn't matter so much as long as combined I had enough to do a 10 by 10 square. So I cut those out. Then I ran a bead of glue, probably 3/4 of an inch wide, along the center once they were cut, and then just glued those together. And then I had a large enough sheet to make my 10 by 10 inch square. And so I've already got one that I cut out. Here's my seam where I glued the 2 sheets together. It's not really even that visible. So now I've got my 10 by 10 and we can start folding to make our envelope. So I think I want where all this writing is to be my flap. And your first step, I'm gonna have to maybe move you up a bit. My first step is to kind of place it here in a diamond angle. And then I'm taking a ruler and I'm going to line that up exactly with the top point and the bottom point. And once I have that lined up, I'm going to take this side and bring this edge right up to my ruler, which is my center point, and I'm going to crease it. And then I can move my ruler aside, and then we take this side and bring it up and do the same thing. So I'm just going to make sure I get my point nice and straight at the bottom, and then bring these 2 edges together. Okay. So now we have this thing that sort of looks like an ice cream cone. Then our next step is to take this point and bring it up, and we're going to crease it across here. Now, where you decide to crease it is up to you. This is going to be your width. So once we fold this, this is going to be like the length of your envelope. And then this, from this edge to here, is going to be the height of your envelope. So if you don't want it as high, you can bring it up farther. If you want it a little deeper, you can bring it down. I think I'm going to put mine right about here. I want to make sure that all of my pieces will fit in there okay. That looks pretty good. So I'm just going to kind of line this peak up with this peak so that you're pretty square, and then give it a crease across there. Then this little point at the top, you're just going to fold over the edge and I want to make sure I've got it straight. And then crease that right there. Then the next step is to take this edge and you're going to bring it over to this crease right here. And then just crease that. So this edge is going to be straight up and down. And then we're taking this edge, bringing it to this crease on this side. And you've got something that looks like this. Now the only bit of cutting that we have to do is to cut out these little squares or notches on the sides here. So you can see where I folded this. We're going to cut here and across there. So I'm going to take my scissors, cut up to that folded line, and then down this way. And do the same on this side. So I'm going to cut across and then down along this fold. And that is it for cutting. So now we have these little flaps on the side. We're going to pull this out and push those in to form our gusset. So here's the crease that I made on the front, and I'm just going to push that in. And then here, you're going to take that crease and turn it the other way and push that inward. Now, I used a 24-pound paper for this. I think that feels like a really good weight. You could make it with some thicker paper. It might get a little harder to bend and fold, but you could play around with that. Like, I made a little prototype out of one of my calendar sheets, and they're a little bit heavier paper, and that worked out just fine. Okay, so now we have something that looks like this, and we basically have our envelope. Then we take this top part and fold that down. That becomes our flap. Now we've got all of our folds in place. I'm going to open this up, and you can see that we've got a seam here. So this isn't necessary, but I think it gives it a little more structure. I'm going to take a piece of tape and tape this whole seam shut. And it doesn't matter what kind of tape you use, if you want to use some older washi tape or packing tape or masking tape, because it's all going to be hidden anyway. So I'm just going to take some of this masking tape or packaging tape that I have. This is 1 inch wide. Depending on the size of your envelope, you might decide to use a thicker or thinner piece of tape. And I'm just going to tape the seam shut. You don't want to go beyond this fold here of your peak, because that's going to be flipped to the inside of your envelope, and I think it would add too much bulk on that little crease there. So I'm just going to tape it like that. And then if we fold this back up, that'll go to the inside. You won't see your tape. And look at the gussets. Isn't that cool? I love all the room in there. And it's only 1 sheet of paper. You don't have to glue in all of these other extra pieces. So like I mentioned, just a little bit of glue. So the only glue that I would do is to glue this little triangle down on the inside to kind of hold everything together. So I'm going to take, for that, some art glitter glue. And I'm just going to run it along this little triangle flap here. And then bring that up and inside and tuck that in. And that basically completes our envelope. Now we can do some finishing touches. I don't like the peeky peek here, so on this sample that I made from my wall calendar, I just rounded that corner. So you can, on this one, I'm going to do something a little bit different, but you could round it, you could fold it in, you could cut it off, you could do whatever you wanted to this flap. Now for closing your flap, a closure, there are options there too. I mean, you could take a piece of string and just tie it closed. You could maybe make a policy envelope type closure. Here on this one, I just took a strip of paper and glued it on the sides. So that works nicely to put my flap in. On this one, I thought I would do something a little bit different. I have this cardstock medallion, and I'm just going to place that on there to use to tuck my flap into. So what I thought I would do is to first fold this where I need it. So I'm going to place this on here, and I think if I fold this up like somewhere, maybe I should move this up a little bit higher. I'm going to keep it 1/4 of an inch from the bottom of my envelope. So I think we'll just turn this up about halfway so I can tuck it about halfway down my medallion. So I'm just going to turn that to the inside and glue it down. And I could cut it off, but I think just having this extra piece gives it a little bit more strength. So I'm going to take some glue. Just glue this peak. Okay, and now I'm going to take my medallion and glue that on there, but I'm just going to glue the bottom half of it. Make sure I don't get too far up. Okay, I'm going to put my flap down, make sure my glue does not go. I think it's going to be down too far, so I'm going to give this another fold, just so it doesn't come down quite so far. There, I think that'll be sitting in a better spot. And now I'll take my glued medallion and place that right about there. There. Now I've got a flap and a closure, and you can go to town decorating your envelopes and doing whatever else you would like to do to them. But I'm just going to stop here, and we can take our ephemera pieces, tuck them in there. Look at all that room. I could put a ton more in there. And close it up. And there we go. I hope you enjoyed that project today. I really had fun making these pieces. And until next time, bye-bye.